Good morning. Let me greet you again in the powerful and precious name of our beloved Christ, who does all things for us and who does them wonderfully well. Let me, as I said, greet you. Thank you for this long tenure of audio and virtual and visual sermons and in worship, and you have been faithful in participating, and we thank God for that. I want to preach somewhat inspirational this morning, and nonetheless, I hope not any less convicting and resourceful, but inspirationally, to inspire you. I know all of us, we've gone through a long season of doubt and not knowing and things psychologically that can pull our minds down and subject us to a lot of spiritual warfare that we have to fight and struggle and strive to keep our mind in that spiritual vein. So I want to encourage you, because one thing for sure, because we have been in pandemic mode and conditions, we cannot stop. We've had to continue. We talk about normalcy. Well, I'm honest, I don't know what normal is no more. I don't. I know what it was like before, as well as yourself, before the pandemic came in March 2 years ago. But, well, actually started around January, but March we had to come under the guidelines of the Health Department, FDC, and so I don't know what normal is. I know what normal was, and so we're still morphing and we're still transitioning, and we thank God. I thank God for you. Thank God. So I want to kind of appeal to you along the lines of just this word, safe. Safe. I was, one of my greatest experiences in life was, in fact, my being ex-military. Talk about it all the time. Draw, hopefully, a lot of useful parallels from being in the military and being, a child of God. When the first night I got into the war zone, not in the war zone, at the airport, coming from my last duty station. Well, we took a lot of rounds at the airport that night. And I said to myself, it's just simply no way. This is not a safe place. It's really a whole lot worse than they say it is. And with all those rounds, incomings that landed and were exploding, I just simply said, it's just simply no way that I will make it out of here. It did not look favorably. It looked dark. I don't care what way. Wasn't saved then, but I still had a sense of what safety was, and that was not a safe position, a place to be in. So I want to talk to you about safe this morning. Just safe, not being safe, safe. Acts 27 and 20. And when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was taken away. But after long absence, Paul, that means he didn't eat in a long time, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and said, Sirs, you should have hearkened unto me, and should not have loosed from Crete, and to have gained this harm and loss. And now I exhort you to be of good courage, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. For there stood by me this night an angel of the Lord, whose I am and whom I serve, saying, Fear not, Paul, for thou must be brought before Caesar. And lo, God has given thee all them that sails with thee. I believe it's 142 people in that ship at the time. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God, and it shall be even as it was told me. Howbeit, we must be cast upon a certain land, safe. The Empire say you're safe in a stadium that have 92,000 cheering fans on a crucial player. If the Empire say you're safe, or the whatever they call them, or the referee say you're safe, you are safe. You're safe. But now they got smart and got these cameras that can overturn, you know. But the old school, they would say you're safe. And that means that runner was safe. It didn't matter what nobody said, what they thought, how they got angry, how much dust they kicked up on the referee, and all of the names, choice names that they would call it. It did not make that runner unsafe. And so I want to talk about being safe. This text presents Paul. There's a lot of it I won't cover because this is just part of the text. This is part of the pericope. It's not all of it. Because Paul is on his way. Remember this. Paul was placed on a ship by the Roman authority on his own appeal to go to Rome and see Caesar, because he didn't want to face the courts, you know, and some charges that he wasn't guilty of, and he didn't want to go to Jerusalem. So he got on, they put him on a ship that was probably a grain ship leaving Egypt. So it was an Egyptian ship, and it was going not all the way, but it was going in the direction of Rome. And so when they got there, the season for sailing had pretty much passed. It was dangerous. And Paul, around the 9th verse, Paul told these gentlemen, the owner of the ship, as well as the shipmaster and the captain of the Roman centurion or whoever that was in charge of the prisoners that was also on this ship. And they listened at the shipmaster, listened at the captain of those men much more than he did Paul. And Paul said, Sirs, I perceive that this is going to be a pretty dangerous journey. They pay Paul no attention. He's a prisoner in chains, you know. He said, I perceive. But, you know, I'm quite sure that there was some spiritual connection there, or it just may have been naturally perception, because him knowing the weather pattern and what the weather would do at a certain time. So, in other words, they struck out on this journey. And remember I said earlier, all of us, our journey still marches on as believers. Even though we're in somewhat a breezy season of of danger, of catching, being impacted by the virus, and by all of the things that surround all of the people who purpose and deliberately and high-handedly, rebel against taking what would seem a shot that would at least minimize the impact. And so we're still marching, we're still sailing on, so to speak. And what we're looking for is safety. Not only a safety of the physical, but we also, our spiritual man, we want our spiritual man to be safe. I suppose that's why you keep on listening, is because you know that your soul needs nourishment. I hope that is the major reason that you're listening, is that you know and do understand that your spiritual man needs nourishment. I like the way that Luke framed this, because Luke says when they left, going around Crete and about and there and about, he said that they caught a favorable wind. Said that wind blew softly, and they supposed that they had reached favor, had gained favor in their sailing. Well, when you're going, things are never as bad as they're going to get when you're going the wrong way. God, they always start out, you say, oh, I got that. That ain't nothing now. That's all you got. Things are never as awful and awesome as they will get if you keep going the wrong direction. We was kids, we used to have saying, might not get you now, but I'll get you later. Might not get you now. A lot of times riding the school bus, guys would hit me. I said, it's all right, tomorrow I'll catch up with you. Might not get you now, but I'll get you later. And then not long after Luke framed this, around that 9th and 10th verse, it said they encountered a strong breeze, and they could not sail progressively. They could not sail into the headwind. And so they pulled under, I'm skipping some of this, of the names and so forth, because I don't want to not preach what I'm preaching. I'm just bringing us up, giving us some context as to to the text. And so they pulled up. They threw out certain things in the boat. They braced the boat with ropes underneath to make sure that it wouldn't tear apart, to strengthen the boat. They straked the sail. In other words, they pulled the sail down, and then just let the boat run free. And in doing so, this from Claudius, they ran on a certain island, which is called Claudius, and the boat had been battered so that a lot of work had to come about the boat. And on the third day, did not say where they were in their journey. They had to tear out tackling of the ship. In other words, things that they used, to brace things in the ship and tie down things, the tackling. And when neither sun, that's our text right there. And finally, see, when you lose, if you're talking about being safe now, they were unsafe because they had lost, according to verse 20, that steering mechanism, that navigational system. They had lost their navigational system. When you lose your navigational system, you just might be going round and round at a fast pace. Huh? And the cloudier it is in life, the more likely all of us are potentially vulnerable to losing our navigational system. Somebody, oh Lord, is not praying like they used to. Somebody's not studying their Bible like they used to. Somebody's saying, I'm just tired. I'm hemmed into this house. I can't go out and eat me a good meal without looking over my shoulder. I can't go walk through the places I'm not going to buy anything. I'm not going to spend my tithe money. I'm just tired. You can lose your navigational system. You can use your guiding light, that which. And verse 20 says, the sun, not the stars. Why does he say the sun, not the stars? It's because that is what they navigated by. And when you're in a storm, see, this storm is full blast now. I don't know where the storm, I don't know what the stage of the storm is in your life. I don't know if it's Cat 1 or Cat 5. But whenever you lose your ability to navigate, come on and talk to me. This whole pandemic environment have changed the way, I don't like to use this word, but I'm going to use it. It's changed the way that we play the game. In other words, the way we live. It has changed the way that we live. It has, for many of us, it has changed our money status. For many of us hadn't been in a church because of lack of confidence in coming and sharing with other sisters and brothers for fear of being impacted by the disease. It has changed our travel, changed our vacation time. Almost every day, even this morning, my wife said to me, "You want me to mark you some time off?" And I say to her, "Baby, the captain needs to be at the wheel in the middle of a storm. In the middle of a storm, the captain, they're looking for the captain. And so there was no storm, and then the weather was bad. The water beat up the ship. You see that? No steering mechanism. The water beat up the ship. And then the text says that all hope to be saved was taken from us. This vicious storm, Euroclydon, this mighty tempest of wind, like a hurricane, like a tornado, had rendered them hopeless. In other words, that word hopeless means that the storm violently took authority over them. They at first they was kind of cutting through the storm, but now the storm has taken the mastery. And that's the way life is apart from Christ. If you try to sail without Christ, or if you're sailing at the wrong time, sometimes the Lord said, "Be still and know that I'm God." Sometimes he said, "I know you smart and you deep and you heavy, but on this one, trust me, you just need to be still, and I'll work it out to my own glory and to your good." Do you hear what I'm saying? Some things that we can't work out. Some things, the move of the politician pen cannot fix. Some things you just have to be still. So that in the middle of this storm that they shouldn't have been in the first place, because Paul admonishes them. Look at this. So the first thing is how to be safe is, as much as you can, the grace of God, don't lose your navigational system and ability. Christ, don't allow for Christ to become lesser and lesser and lesser in your experience, in your life. Love him with all your heart. When you can't see in the storm and in the doubt, when all of the naysayers and all of your friends and people come, and everyone, like Job's friend, come with a different message. On Jesus Christ, the solid rock I stand, and all other ground is nothing but sinking sand. And so they had lost the ability to know which way to go. Oh, my brother and sister, oftentimes I see people say, look like they ought to know better than to do that. I said, they blind, baby. They're blind. Don't get mad with a blind person. They're stumbling because they can't see. They would do better, but they can't. They are blind. And so now they have lost their ability, and they have lost their system of navigation. In him we live. Talk to me now. In him, I know you're talking to me at the house. We live. In him we move. And in him we have our being. Don't lose. Don't trade in under these conditions. Don't trade in your navigational system. So they had lost, verse 20. But after long absence, Paul stood in the midst of them and said, sirs, you should have hearkened unto me, and you would have not have lost, have loose from Crete, and to have gained this harm and loss. Now what Paul is saying is this to me. Paul is saying what you did was preventable. When you look at it, it's preventable. Because in verse 9, Paul says, I perceive that if you take this journey at this time of the year, you're going to suffer some loss. And here they are in the middle of the Adriatic Sea. Here they are being pushed and shoved every which way, throughout everything, probably throughout all the grain or whatever they was carrying, to Rome. All of that is gone. Lost. You see, their hope vanished that they should be saved. In other words, they were sitting there looking at each other bug-eyed with their mouths open because they had no hope of being lost, of being saved. Don't allow anybody else disdainment with life in this pandemic. Don't allow that person to be your telephone buddy. You need hope. You need somebody going to tell you what Jesus, not what he can do, but what he is already doing. He's already, just like he was making ways out of no way, he still is. Just like he was a bridge over troubled water, he still is. Just like you had a friend in him, in Jesus, he still is your friend. He is the same today as he was yesterday, and will be the same on tomorrow. Don't lose your navigation ability, and then don't lose your hope. Don't allow your hope to vanish. Don't allow your hope. remain. Allow your hope to remain. Abram hoped against hope. He hoped against hope. When there was no reason to hope, he kept on hoping. Then, thank God that when there are those who get off the path of safety, there is those who are willing to pay the cost, according to verse number 21. According to verse number 21. There's those who are willing to pay the cost of safety. There are those who are willing to pay the cost that you can have safety, that you can know, that your faith can be stirred to the fact that you're still safe. I stayed in the war zone for a whole complete 12 months, a year. And I never threatened. My life was a threat just to be in the country. But my life personally never came under threat. But when I got in country 12 months earlier, I just knew that my hope of living had narrowed down. But somehow, some way, that God always kept me. And I thank him for it. Somebody, see, safety is at a cost. Look at verse 21. But after long absence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and said, Sir, Paul had denied, even though he probably couldn't eat that much on that tossing Bronco-like ship, but what he abstained from any food. And Paul resorted to praying about the issue. Not just for himself, but for everybody who was on the ship. He said, Sirs, if you had hearkened unto me, if you had listened at me, and have not loosed from Crete to have gained this harm. Now, verse 22, now I exhort you to be of good cheer. How you going to exhort me to be of good cheer when I'm in the midst of a compounded corona and Delta virus? And one seemed to be worse, the last seemed to be worse than the first. Be of good courage. Be of good courage. What do you mean, Reverend? If you got to go home absent from the body, it's present with the Lord. God knows I don't want to go home like that. But if I have to, I have somewhere where there's no more cloudy days. You see, Paul went against the odds. He said, it's going to cost me. He's already strained just by being in the middle of that condition. But he can't get out of it. So what does he do? He talked to God. And I exhort you to be of good courage, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. The ship is going. See, America has a bad ship. We have a bad ship with a lot of bad things that we can't take to heaven in the ship that we're in. There's a lot of. Don't think that the virus is just apart from God. God just slipped and let something happen. Oh no, this is on purpose. Whenever Pharaoh refused to obey, after one plague, God says, well, don't bother with them frogs no more. Take that sand. Go find some ashes somewhere. Get ashes. Y'all been burning wood. Get some ashes and just throw them up in the air. And lice were all over the land, just from a few handful of ashes. No, God knows how to clean up what he needs to clean up. See, nobody wants to take blame, you know. Paul, look what he did. He admonished these men about that ship. So I told y'all not to do that. The church has been admonished by preachers and who have courage enough. You know, we're not, I'm gonna just use the, we're not crazy. We know that same-sex marriage is out of place. We're not crazy in America. We understand what leadership is, clear across the board, and how it's to be administered. We're not crazy. We know when I go home and I look at a soccer field, that soccer field is full of kids with their parent out there coaching them, have no fear of the holy, but they know how to kick a round soccer ball. You don't want to talk to me. We know we're not stupid in America. We're not crazy. We have good sense. But good sense is not what it takes. All ye that are labor and heavy laden, shucks, I feel like preaching this morning. Come unto me, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke up on you and learn of me. My yoke is easy and my burdens are light. We know. That's how we got to where we are. And it's a whole bunch of garbage on the ship that we don't want to let go. Zarephath means a cutting flow, a cutting. And God can take us down to Zarephath, and every now and then he just keep cutting a little bit off here and a little bit off there and a little bit off here and a little bit off there until we come to the condition, as Pastor Abraham said, Bible condition. The condition that God has ordered and designed and enabled to us to come. Safe. Safe. It takes somebody to stand up and pay the price to buy back that little girl that was in Naaman's wife's house. And I wish that my master could see the man of God in Samaria. I wished he could come. Did you see what all the dancing that Naaman did? Naaman danced and danced and danced. He danced around the rivers. He danced around the prophet's house. He just danced. He had it his way. These men did not winter in a place that was a little uncomfortable. And sometimes, if you follow God, you're going to have to be a little uncomfortable. And by them trying to get from where they were to a place that was commodious, in other words, it accommodate them. They ran into trouble. And now Paul has to buy back. I don't mean with money, but with prayer, intercessory prayer. He prayed for them. So safety is at a cost. They took a major loss in verse 21. They took a major loss because they did not obey God. If you're going to be safe, if we're going to be safe, and we are, we have to, on our part, God always does what he's going to do, even in spite of our disobedience. God always. But in the storm that we are in, whether it get better or not, that's not our business. Our business is to know that I'm safe, and we ought to grab as many other people through the Word of God, to make sure best that God give us grace that they are safe also. Look at this. Those of us who know, let me encourage you a little bit more. Verse 22 and 23. Verse 22 and 23 says that you can be of that you can communicate with God in the storm. Verse 22 and 23. And now I exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. It's amazing what God cares for. See, God not concerned about the ship, not too much, because you need to get another one anyway. You got too much stuff, so he made them throw their stuff overboard. Huh? But he cared about their lives. That's what Christ came to Calvary for. Huh? Some people who got more than they can ever have and reaching for more and more and more, and more and more. You see, God says, throw that stuff overboard. And even your ship, I'm going to get you close enough that ones can't swim. You get some broken pieces and come aboard. You come to shore. But your ship, that ain't no interest with God. God doesn't care whether I drive a Chevrolet or a Mercedes. He doesn't care. That ain't his interest. God is concerned about the condition of my soul. And let me say something else to you. The reason, if I don't get to it, the reason why Paul stood up is that Paul had reason to stand up. God, I said Paul had reason. God had promised Paul 3 times that you got to go to Rome to make your appointment to meet your appointment with Caesar. You got to go there. You can't. So no shipwreck, no bouncing in the water, no storm, no Euroclydon. None of that is going to prevent you from what you have already been ordained to do. Oh, my sister, my brother, you in your family and in your neighborhood, if you know somebody going somewhere on a mission with God, it might be good if you hook up with them. Their safety may be your safety. These men in the ship, they were safe because Paul was safe. And finally, in 28, I believe in 18, 19, somewhere along there, Paul entered into Rome. He did make it. And in the last several verses, Paul is preaching and teaching in his own free house in Rome. Some believed him and some didn't. But many times there are purposes. But before I say that, let me say this. In verse 23, Paul belongs to God. You see that? Whom I am, whose I am. I belong to God. Now this just isn't arbitrarily. This is all fastened and connected one thing with another. Huh? Why? Because there's a mission that God wants Paul to complete. And if he's going to complete the mission, then God has to make the way for him to do it. Let me say something to you. Many times, including myself, as soon as we encounter some difficulties while we are sailing, or while we are traveling, and while we on our mission, saying, I'm on my mission, Lord, guide me, and that kind of thing. And we really ain't on our mission. Get on your mission. Paul said, whose I am. And he's faithful. And who I serve. He's Paul's Lord, but Paul is his servant, active servant. Paul is in this trouble because of active service unto the Lord. So it's who he belonged to and who he serves. Verse 23. So many times their purpose is far more important than the danger of the storm. God's presence in verse 23, God's presence that stood for Paul, that stood by him that night, the angel of God whom I serve. That's God's purpose. God's purpose transcends the horrific condition of the storm. And Paul spoke to God out of the storm, and God answered Paul in the storm. You're talking about being saved. Somebody have to purchase safety with their prayer. Somebody got to stop looking at the pandemic and got to stop looking at Republicans, stop looking at CNN News, and stop looking at MSNBC News. You got to start looking to God. You got to start looking to God. And you got to start telling people, God's people. And we have to stop acting like we're afraid to tell God's people what is going on in this hour. We act like we don't know that sin is a reproach to any people. We act like we don't know that. We had never read it in our Bible. Sin is a reproach to any people. But righteousness will exalt a nation. Want to be exalted? We're not exalted now. This nation is not being exalted. We're at the bottom. We're in our shame. And we're talking about it's going to be all right when we come back to normal. Well, God got a thing in his furnace. He knows how to turn the heat up. It ain't none of mine, but he knows how. We got to start believing preachers and stop putting our confidence in politicians. Come on and talk to me. Or we need politicians, we need educators, we need finance people, we need all them. But beloved, we need preachers. Preachers, God need preachers who will stand and tell flat-footed in the hour in which we're living. We're not living in 1952, but we got the God of 1950. The God of ages is our God. We declare he's the same today as he was yesterday and will be the same on tomorrow. Paul said, you all disobeyed. If you had listened to me, you wouldn't have brought this up on yourself. Do you hear what I'm saying? And so in the midst of this sea, Paul paid for safety. And so if you stay with, look what he says, and I'm through. He says, if you stay with me, God has given thee all them that sail with thee. That's what God told him. And then he said, be of good cheer. I believe God. It shall be even as it was told me. However it is, however it be it, I don't know how it's going to happen, but we won't come to shore on the ship. I don't know what God's going to do. I don't know. It's not for me to know, but I do know that I'll get to where God is taking me. I do know that. He cares for me. He cares for me on my journey. He cares for me on the stormy seas. And even when I disobey God, even when I fall short, God cares for me. We're safe, made so by what Jesus did over 2,000 years ago. And I'm through. What did he do? Died on a hill, buried in a borrowed tomb, But early on the third day morning, he got up. You mean for the likes of us? Yes, for the likes of us. Such was some of you. Such was some of you. The reason why my love transcends, people who don't know their gender and this, that, other. My love. But I tell you what I can't do. I can't make you safe when I got to tell you about what you need to straighten up or what God will help you with. You can't straighten it yourself, but God will help you with. Do you hear what I'm saying? We have lost all of the pillars of our community, and nobody will say nothing. Our young people live together, and we commend them. We commend them. We don't encourage them, baby, you ought to get married. Well, us old folk, we have done a whole bunch of stuff. Why can't we commend our young people to do some of the stuff that we do? Safe. Somebody have to pay for it. Paul paid for it. Nothing gonna happen to you. But your ship, and that's what I want to tell you, your ship is not coming to shore. Your ship. You're not gonna come to shore with your ship. I don't want that. What's in your ship? But you will. You will. Because I got a servant on board that has to come to Rome in order to propagate the gospel. All my brothers and sisters, don't fool yourself about the gospel. The gospel is what God said it is. It's the power of God unto salvation. To the